afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vivian Matembwa, and I'm a security consultant with Privacy, and I will be your host for the rest of today. As we continue to ascend towards cruising altitude, I hope you're enjoying your journey so far. In the next segment, we're going to dive into all things threat intel, malware, government, and education. First up, we have a panel titled Let's Chat About Data Breaches, Crypto, Cloud Acceleration, and Ransomware. This panel will be moderated by Privasec's Asia Regional Head and Principal Consultant, Quang Hinh Lim. Quang Hinh leads the team delivering services to our growing client base in Southeast Asia. He has more than a decade of experience in the cybersecurity industry, helping organizations to improve their understanding of cybersecurity and aligning this with their management and business objectives. Over to you, Q, to introduce the rest of the panel.
Hello. Right, so today we're going to talk about data breaches, crypto, cloud acceleration, and ransomware. We have a few of our experts here to join us on the panel. The first on the list is Todd Carroll. So Todd is the Chief Information Security Officer and the VP of Cyber Operations at CyberAngel, an industry-leading data leak detection company. He was also the Senior Executive Manager and Deputy to the Special Agent in charge at the FBI, so looking forward to some of the stories there. Second, we have Leon Boon Ang, who is the Head of IT Security at the National University of Singapore. And we also have Brian Cheng joining us, who is the Co-President of the Bitcoin Association of Hong Kong. Okay, let me just check if everyone is online, or rather have their images on. Okay, I see everyone online now. Right, so let's kick it off. So we have about 20 minutes, so it's a bit on the shorter side, but to kick it off, let's start off with a few key questions. So we are covering pretty broad topics today around data breaches, crypto, and cloud acceleration. To start off, maybe let's tackle the question around data breaches and ransoms first, because I think it might be the broader one, and then we can start drilling down. So maybe first to Todd, why does it seem like the number and severity of data breaches has increased in the recent years? Because it seems like the news has been getting out. People should be a bit more aware of these issues. So we haven't really seemed to have gotten better at this security thing.
Yeah, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it has. Data breaches have accelerated over the last couple of years. Part of it, I think, is an awareness that, one, they're becoming more public. And as George talked about in the last panel, or in his last talk, is that, you know, the numbers that are occurring in, but also the numbers behind them, the amount of money that it takes, that it's costing companies to recover from these data breaches are pretty large. And they're getting out there, you know, in not only the number, but awareness. And as boards are being held liable for these breaches, and during the due diligence of, you know, awareness, it's just not inside your firewall right now. It's occurring, you know, what's the root causes behind those breaches? And that's why they're becoming so sensationalized. And they seem like they're becoming greater in a number, and they probably are.
And those are good points there. So I'm leading on to this, right? It seems like there's some consistencies in the root cause of these data breaches, and with that, we can also have some technology for detection and resolving of these data leaks. And I think an interesting thing that we see in the market right now is to these breaches, there's a large number, at least in the private space, that are actually leading on to ransoms in terms of ransomware from attacks. Any comments around these areas?
Yeah, so yeah, the root cause, a lot of these breaches is that they're avoidable. If you know where to look. You know, right now imagine how we're sharing information now, how we used to share information, you know, 10, 15 years ago, right? You know, no longer the perimeter sitting there. And a lot of our business units are sharing information outside of our walls with others to do our jobs. You know, we're relying a lot on third parties and vendors and you know, trusted partners to handle that information, where your company may be supplied and have a good cybersecurity, practice and policy and everything to watch that. But you're sharing information with others that maybe not. And if you're not paying attention to what they're doing with your information and looking for that, information is being exposed by other companies and making, and putting your stuff at risk out there. It makes it very, very, very dangerous at this point. So yes, technology can be used to confront this. At our company, we use we're in the data leak detection business where we look through billions of exposed documents every day that are just out there. It's a way that we do to search to look for that information that is out there being exposed, and working with those companies and our clients to determine where the information is, how's it's being exposed, who's exposing it, and then how do we help them secure that information before someone else can find it and monetize it.
Yeah, those are good points there. Yeah. So I think let's move on to Brian and Dongbin a little bit for a little while, because I suspect you have a lot of stories to tell there, and that'd be a good way to tie off this panel. Perhaps let's go to Brian for a quick while. So Brian obviously is very familiar with the crypto space as the co-president of the Bitcoin Association of Hong Kong. So crypto in particular, I think it's a security-centric conversation, especially with the ways it's being used and talked about today. So I guess a good question to start off with would be, why does cyber risk mitigation matter in the crypto space?
That's actually a really good question. And I think there's two words in that question that really stand out, especially it's called risk mitigation. Because if you're asking the question of risk mitigation, then the assumption is that over time, no person, process, or technology will be completely vulnerability free. If we maybe have a comparison of why risk mitigation matters in the crypto space, we can maybe look in the traditional banking space as well. CNBC reported that the bank JP Morgan in 2019 spent $600 million on enhancing the security resiliency. But the difference is that with a traditional bank, if let's say there was an unfortunate circumstance where the bank was to go under, then the depositor's assets would be to some extent guaranteed by a government in a more developed country. Versus if you're in, let's say, the crypto space, there is a significant amount of trust and faith that you're putting into the system. If we were looking at just 2020 by itself, there was about 75 exchanges that have shut down just this year for a variety of reasons. And I'm sure that some of them could have been due to security reasons. And you might be wondering, with risk mitigation, why would you care about it if there is not a lot of regulation, if there's a chance for a hacker to maybe compromise your funds? Well, the issue is that because it's not so much regulation or ways to really ensure, protect those assets, one of the ways an exchange might be able to differentiate themselves is maybe through security resiliency. Maybe they have certain ways to enhance their people, their process, and technologies. And in this space where it's still emerging, it's rapidly moving, exchanges might not have as much money as, let's say, a bank with $600 million, but you still need to demonstrate a level of security resiliency to enhance the trust and faith for people to maybe use your platform or service. Not having that basic security resiliency might decrease the chance of someone actually trusting you.
Okay, I think you also touched on a little around the trends around crypto space, the security related trends over there, around the need for awareness, not just on the exchanges, but also the users of these services.
Correct. Actually, maybe I can share a story. So a couple days ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Nick Hammer. He's a real individual, and we actually received an email directly to the association from this individual. And I actually got approval from him before this to actually share the story. But he said that, hey, I'm reaching out to the association. I want to do this deal. I want to get some introductions to the community. I want to see if I can connect with more people. And having been exposed to more of these phishing attempts, we started to scrutinize these email addresses in a little bit more detail. So Nick Hammer works for a company called BlockFills, and we looked at that email address and we're wondering, why is there a hyphen between block and fills? So then we started doing a little bit of digging around. We started asking our friends to say, have you ever heard of this individual called Nick Hammer? He's using a different email address. Can we get in contact with them? And by eventually getting contacted to the real Nick Hammer, we realized that somebody else was using his identity and was trying to make some connections and do some deals on behalf of Nick Hammer. And because of that scenario, we're thinking, had we not been exposed to more of the cybersecurity training, we might have been actually connecting this imposter pretending to be Nick Hammer to somebody else. So I think everyone, not just in the crypto space, should actually have some level of basic security awareness training, because it's the difference between accidentally contacting or connecting with someone who you think is the same person that you're speaking with, when in reality they could be imposters. So I think it's important to not just look at the crypto space for cybersecurity awareness training, but it should be actually be considered for all sectors and all industry, especially with the rise in capital need for data.
That's a good point. I was actually looked into the email thread with Nick Hammer in that case, and it was actually quite interesting because well, whoever sent that email was trying his very best to be convincing. And if you look at the address he sent it for, is block-fails.com, but Nick Hammer's signature had his actual address over there, which is blockfails.com without the dash. And he said it's just they were just having issues with their DNS under construction, so please use our alternative domain. So it's trying his very best there to be convincing. But that was a very good example, and I think something that many organizations face today. Now, coming from the perspective of Leong Boon from Singapore University, or National University Singapore, I guess versus what Brian and versus what Todd would see, it might be a bit of a different perspective, because it's coming from a very open organization. We have to deal with a lot of different threats, especially with a large population of individuals that might or might not be security aware, and to maintain an infrastructure for all of these. So Leong Boon, would you like to put a word in around your opinion of the state of things today?
Right. Thank you, Conning. And thanks to Brian and Todd for starting off the conversation. Yeah, I guess in a user environment like ours, where we are focused on education, academic freedom, it's really difficult to balance between security and usability. So we have been seeing a great deal of different kinds of attacks in our environment. In particular, a lot of phishing during this period of time related to the COVID-19 situation. A lot of different attempts to inject malware like ransomware into our users' desktops and endpoints. So there definitely has been a growth in that. We have also been seeing a great deal of attacks from remote access protocols like RDP and SSH, because of people working from home, people working remotely. So naturally, with the number of devices that are opened for remote access, you will definitely see an increase in the number of attacks, brute force attacks, for example, or brute force password attempts on these systems.
Yep. So I guess some of these is coming along from the need for digital transformation and cloud acceleration and a push towards a more remote workforce, which would also mean that having access to these resources remotely to go about your day-to-day work would become a priority, or has been a priority over the last couple of months. I know we have touched on this topic briefly earlier today, but anything that Todd, Brian, or Leong Boon that you would like to add around this?
Perhaps I'll give that a go. So just elaborating on what I've mentioned about remote access, right? The traditional way to secure that would be via VPNs. And as we all know, VPNs are good in a way, but at the same time, during our current situation, right, we might need to have a second look at it. Take, for example, with the increase in bandwidth requirements, some of the organizations actually have sought to reduce their bandwidth requirements for VPN by using a split tunnel. So, that would actually give a false sense of security to their users, because their users would think that, oh, I'm still being protected by our VPN, by a company VPN. But actually, once the split tunnel has been implemented, right, then all of their usual internet traffic will go through their ISP instead of their office connections, and therefore not being protected in that sense. So from that perspective, there could be other technologies like VDI or even digital workspace, which can come into the picture now to enhance the security for remote working.
Yeah, I think we are definitely seeing some interesting trends over here. For those in Singapore, I think you'll be familiar with it, where the government made an initiative to do a hard separation between devices that can access the internet and devices that can access the government intranet. And I think there was an announcement recently that they were going to make an effort to tweak that somewhat. So having two separate devices or having that hard separation is hard to maintain, right? Not easy to maintain. Instead, they're now going to rely on software that would render the browser remotely. So you're essentially just watching a video feed of the browser you're using, and using that to create a sandbox separate from the device that's accessing potentially sensitive data. So I think we can see there's a lot of emphasis here on how to protect the users from themselves or from any mistakes they might make over there. And I think the latest Pullman Institute has come up with their estimates for the direct cost of a data breach to be about $150 record globally and $242 record per record in the US. So considering most organizations do hold quite a few of these records, I mean, if just of your employees, of your customers, the numbers do add up. And trying to come out with the appropriate controls and govern the use of this data and govern the handling of these data is definitely going to be an increasing challenge. Now, maybe let's circle back to the topic around data breaches. And Todd, I understand he has some stories to share from his past life that we could get some lessons from or learn a few things from.
Yeah, it's interesting coming from working at the FBI for over 20 years, and then now being in this cybersecurity world. Dealing with a lot of people in the out there in business when I was with the FBI, and talking to them about the different things that they were concerned with and what companies are concerned with, and not necessarily what the U.S. government was concerned with, but how do we help protect companies from themselves. And there's so many different threats that are out there, whether it's the insider threat or the way we share information, or even what I do now with trying to track data across different organizations. It all boils down a lot to the human, right? No matter what, even at the most technical hacks that I used to be involved in, whether it was a national security breach or a criminal breach, sometimes it evolved down to that user, right? And now we see it today with devices and information and the ability to store information at home, and people sharing incorrectly or oversharing, causing problems. I remember a time with the FBI, and we were doing a case where a law firm that was actually an international law firm had all their information wiped out. And part of it was because they left an employee who was disgruntled, who had left the company, and he decided about a month later, after getting drunk one night, to log back in, and his credentials were still live, and he decided to wipe out all their data. So it wasn't very hard for us to figure out who did it, because it was pretty easy to track him through. He didn't destroy everything. We were able to track him back, and at the end of the day, we were talking to him, and he wasn't cooperating. So we were taking all of the devices that were in the house to take back to the lab to determine which, how he connected and stuff like that. And his wife was getting ready to leave for work, and she wanted her laptop. So she has to have 5 minutes with her husband, and 5 minutes later, he confessed to everything, because he was more scared of his wife than he was of doing about 5 years is what he ended up doing for destruction of material and unauthorized access. So, you always look back to what's the human element, and whether it's what we're doing today and working remotely, and a lot of it boils down to everything we've been talking about: training, um, education, awareness of what our people are doing. And we can only teach the computers to be so good, but at the end of the day, there is that user who's got that that right index finger that's going to click on about anything in the world, and that's what we have to be concerned with.
Yeah,
Definitely.
maybe I have a lead-on question for Todd there, since we are on the topic of breaches and also ransomware, right? I understand that last year, 2 Florida cities actually paid ransom of more than $1 million in Bitcoins. So what's your take on giving in to terrorists? You know, we always say that we don't give in to terrorists. So in this case for ransomware, when do we actually have to pay ransom, and what's your take on that?
You know, it was always our stance when I was with the Bureau that we told companies do never pay ransom. And I'm still of that because, you know, I remember a hospital system in California. They felt they had no choice. And because, you know what, bad planning, right? They had no backups. They had nothing. It was a healthcare. It was actually a major hospital. They needed to. That's a choice they had to make. But remember, if somebody can get to your data to encrypt it, they can also get to your data to what else are they doing with it, right? Is it the same data you had when the last time you saw it? You know, the last time so you really got to be careful, and you got to decide what exactly is going on, what exactly is that information that's out there. And, you know, we see an increase in a dramatic increase in encrypted files because bad guys are out there, they see it, they're able to find open, whether they're a cloud bucket or whether just it's a server sitting out there, and we see the increase in encryption going on and leading to ransomware. I still, you know, it's something that companies have to think about ahead of time. And, you know, once you do it, you have no idea what they did. You know, when you lost control of that, you lost control of a lot more than just that. And you really have to think about that. And hopefully that's in your business plans. But when that happens to companies like that they're in those positions, they obviously don't have a plan and haven't thought about it and didn't think, well, why us? You know, and you think it's always going to be somebody else until it's them, and then you know, bad things happen. But no, my recommendation is absolutely not. Do not pay.
Yeah. Oh, apologies, everyone. So we're a bit short on time already. That was an interesting discussion. But if nothing else, I'll leave this conversation with a takeaway I've never realized before, that married men make exceptionally bad criminals, because when you bring the wife in, they fall. I'd like to thank everyone for their time today. Leong Boon, Todd, and Brian for joining us. And I'll hand the
Thank
time
you.
back to Vivian for the next set of speakers. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.